If any of you watched the ITV Carols for Everyone, I think, hosted by the Princess of Wales, this reading was read by a much more handsome young man than I am. And it's a standard kind of reading for a carol service, and especially for midnight. And I've lost track of the number of times I've preached from this passage. But there's always something different coming, because in these few verses you have packed really what the Gospel of John is all about. The Gospel of John basically then unpacks what is said here, and I'm not going to go into it in any depth at all, really. But I'd like to just focus on just two or three different things. And obviously the beginning, opening line of this Gospel echoes the beginning of Genesis. John is quite clearly making a parallel that in the beginning, well, let's go back to 1968. Some of you will have heard this. Apologies if you've heard it before, but I think some things are worth repeating on a night like this. The Apollo 8 mission in 1968, first time around the dark side of the moon, way before it became a pop song. And the dark side of the moon, as they were coming around, these American astronauts had a brief window of time to relay a message to the world, the first time ever a global broadcast to the whole of humanity that had access to a radio. And they put a lot of thought into what they should say. And 1968 was a really tough year. Race riots in America, Vietnam War was at its height, the Cold War was just going nuts, nuclear missiles were just being made left, right, and center. So the world was in a real mess. And they felt the burden of what should they say to humanity. It'd be Christmas Eve. It's going to be Christmas Eve as they came over that. And this is what they said. I'm not going to read it all out, but Will Anders said, "We are now approaching lunar sunrise. And for all the people back on Earth, the crew of Apollo 8 have a message that we would like to send to you." And this is what they said. "In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and the darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, 'Let there be light.' And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness." And they continued to go through the first few verses of Genesis 1, which were a kind of foundational text for not only the Christian faith, but for the Islamic faith and the Jewish faith as well. And God called the night day, and the darkness he called light, and the evening and the morning were the first day, and so on. And then towards the end, closing verses, and God said, Frank Borman said, "God said, let the waters under the earth be gathered together into one place, and let dry land appear," and it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And then just as the broadcast window was closing, the last few seconds, millions on earth listening to this. And from the crew of Apollo 8, we closed with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you, and then repeated that, all of you on the good earth. And this was Christmas Eve, 1968. And there is something in that. I never tired of reading that, because there is something encapsulated in that, and those words, that sense of our common origin, our common humanity, that despite all of our differences, this opening, deep, deep narrative of the beginning of our world, of our creation. In the beginning, God created everything on the earth. And here we have in the Gospel of John echoing that and saying, God created our world, but he has now come. What did he say? In God, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. So it's really, really ratcheting back the story right to the very, through him all things were made, without him nothing was made that has been made. And then he has about seven different times he mentioned light. And I'm not going to go into all the light shines in the darkness hasn't understood it. In him was life, that life was the light of men. And this theme of light permeates this passage. as it permeated the beginning of Genesis, when it's just darkness, because darkness is simply the absence of light, and then God spoke, God said. And this is God's word, making something happen. And this is what John is saying now, that just as God's called light down to come into the darkness, so now he sent his son to come again to bring light into our darkness. And it's, I had a Christmas once in Australia, and it was all kind of a bit weird, It wasn't very dark. And it certainly wasn't a dreich midwinter. What are we saying these days? A dreich midwinter? It's been like living in a car wash today, to be honest, walking around. You know what I mean? Anyway, so it's different, but the darkness here really gets that. And John's theme is his theme all the way through John about light. And he's linking that this life that Jesus brings is a life that brings light. And I think if there is something that our world desperately needs at the moment, it's clarity. Because light brings understanding. Light helps us to see what is what. At the moment, we need to really pray for the rulers of Syria that they will have light of understanding. Because as some of you will gather, some Islamist fundamentalists from outside of Syria were burning a Christmas tree yesterday in a Christian community. And the Christians are really mad about this, and they're very afraid of how their future lies. And for these new rulers of Syria in this very volatile time, they need clarity, they need light to know what is the way forward, to be able to hold back the dogs of war, to be able to live so that they can have a country that has a place for everyone, really, against all the horrible things that they have all been through. And the darkness of those prisons, it's just awful, harrowing, people coming out of these dungeons, these prisons of torture chambers. And this is light into darkness. It's a very real thing still in our world today. This hasn't changed. And I think the Christmas message is timeless because of that. And all religions have these twin themes of life and light. There's a very common religious kind of symbol that kind of expresses, on the one hand, the vitality of existence that we cannot take it for granted, but also the need to light for wisdom and understanding and clarity. They have that. What John, I'm going to just jump to the end of this passage in verse 14. What John says, those human longings for light and life, that deep human cry which those Apollo 8 astronauts were able to tap into, because people came out. People were sobbing in mission control. People all over the world were just broken, but this message of peace and hope that reminded that we are one family at a time of great division in 1960. It had a massive impact on people. And that it tapped into that deep human longing for life and light. And again, and what John says, and this is really important, verse 14, just at the end of our passage, this word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. And this word dwelling is kind of like he put his tent here, or as Eugene Peterson said, he moved into the neighborhood, he became one of us. And this is shocking. This is, up till now, you could talk about all these terms, quite abstract terms, but now John is saying he really became one of us, really entered into our life. And it's great to see all of you here tonight. Some of you may go to church, some of you may just come once or twice a year. Whatever reason you're here tonight, to know, if you take anything from tonight, it's to know that God knows what it is like to be a human. He's entered into our lives. And the verse closes with this, full of grace and truth. And these are two Hebrew words that have Greek translation, but hesed and emet. And they have come together all the way through the Old Testament, and they basically mean steadfast love and faithfulness. So steadfast love means the kind of love that will not let you go. The kind of love that will see whatever 2025 is bringing down the track for all of us, okay? That love will not let you go through all of that. That love will be with you each step of the way. And truth, steadfast love and truth, what he's talking about there is that faithfulness, that kind of loyalty. It's that loyalty to you that's about genuineness. And it's that sense of light and understanding what is the real way to live. So it's God's loyalty and his helping us to live the right kind of a way, not in a kind of right or wrong way, but just in the right way that is good and fulfilling and right and beautiful and builds community and builds love. And as Princess and Rose Catherine, the theme of the carols for everyone was about empathy and kindness and love, which seem very kind of loose terms, but actually have incredible power to them. So, a bit of a meander tonight, but there's something in this chapter of John's Gospel which taps into our deepest hopes, which was the Apollo astronauts were able to articulate. That in the beginning, God made us all one. And at Christmas time, I believe that God came and was one of us. That is the good news of Christmas, if it is anything.